minute earlier. Going to start proceedings off with an immediate welcome to Brett Mills. Hello, Brett. You say that your fiancée Neelam is a huge fan of the channel. Oh, that's good to know. Fractured her ankle, not good to know, in November, but is back on her feet and wondered if you could all give her a huge shout out for when she gets to watch this later. So to Neelam, Brett Mills, fiancée, get well soon. And welcome to the channel, Brett, and welcome, Neelam. Good morning. Let's say some good morning, shall we? Brenda McGee, Sarah Elliott, Andrea Crash. I've had one coffee in my bell end mug, and I have the next coffee lined up in my muff diver. Is that right? Is that the right? No, other way around. Muff diver bell end. Sorry, I can't read. So big shout out to Neelam, that's lovely. Yeah, everyone's giving a shout out to Neelam. Faith Goodman, good morning. Nikki Hughes, Amanda Honer, Jens Marked, Sage Junkie. Happy Monday, guys. Mrs. PD, Angela O'Keefe, Dawn Claricoats, Mel W, Gabrielle, Rachel Dodge, Brenda McGee, Random Nothingness, Deborah Holdsworth, Heather McDonald, Becky Hicks, Natalie Higgins, Katie Johnston, Angie Knowles, Kaz Dodsworth, John Brannan, good morning to Brighton, Send the Coast Our Love, you know, Nadia's a huge fan, Sage Junkie, Karen Ula, Jan, Kerry J. Williams, I hope Eamon, who I saw was struggling earlier, is feeling a bit better. I saw you all rushing to help. Sod's law, isn't it? Give me 1 second. I'm back, guys. I'm back. It was the postman. It was dear Tim. Lovely Tim. We loved him. Oh, I've lost that. Hi, can I have a shout out? Where were you? Because it's so much. Sue Gilbert. I'm now a family member. You can have a shout out from me, Sue, but I've got a running list here of people that Nadia and obviously me in accompaniment will call out your names later. Big up the post workers, absolutely, Julia Eaton. Ploughing on, not stopped once. Hi, Archie Clark. So, guys, Sally Jenkins, I'll add you to the list. So here's the thing, guys. It's coffee moaning. It's another Monday. It's another day in lockdown. And the dear, shiny-headed one, Chris Whitty, has been out and about. None of that where's Whitty, but where's Wally? Could all UK people stay at home? The UK strain has landed in New Zealand, says Andrea Crash, when our Kiwi flew home. They are all in quarantine, plus also now got the South African strain. Too damn COVID. None in community yet. Yeah, I think here's a curious contradiction, right? I'm totally with you on that, Andrea Crash. Absolutely, everyone does need to stay at home. We're going to talk about dear Chris Whitty in a minute. But it struck us yesterday, and it struck John Campbell, who we talk about a lot. Do you remember the outcry and the fury and the sort of upset with calling it the China virus by our wondrous leader, Trump of America? Obviously, we don't agree with virtually anything Trump has ever said or done, but when he called it the China virus, there was a lot of people who were like, yeah, that's terrible, that's culturally wrong, da-da-da-da. But have you noticed how the world is not at all shy or backward about calling it the Kent virus or the UK virus or the South African virus? I've noticed how that idea that we must be WHO is saying we need to be hypersensitive about not calling it the China virus, but they're quite happy to call it the UK strain and the South African strain. And here's the thing that we need to really clarify here. When I said yesterday when we were talking about it, talk about shooting the messenger, we have in the UK, we don't have many things, we don't get many things right, but we do have some areas of expertise, and by all accounts, our genomics is the best in the world. And so we were kind of shot down for having the capacity and the facility to discover what's probably a variant, much like many other variants in other countries. But because we found it first, it became called the Kent virus, or the UK strain. So here's the way I'd like to go about it. If we're all okay with that, and it seems like the entire world is very fine with calling it the UK virus or the South African virus, I'm going to call it the China virus, because that's where it started. So I feel all right with that. Yeah, Miss P, victim of our own success. It just struck me as quite a sort of acute double standard. To stress that everyone needs to stay in, etc., because of course these things spread around the world. But I think there are many variants. I mean, we are at a point where it's a little bit, unless you stop all international travel, I'm trying to think of the best analogies. One of them is, it's like trying to dry yourself in a full running shower with a flannel. It just ain't gonna happen. It's like a chocolate fire guard. It's like trying to fight someone with a sword made of butter. Do you know what I mean? Better? There you go. Back on 4G. Back on 4G, is that better? Good. Gabrielle, it's hurt. I mean, I don't get hurt by, I'm sure it can be. I don't particularly get hurt. I just find it really annoying when there are double standards. I just find it really annoying that everyone can run around the world in that dirty island called Britain. Now, look, we haven't exactly, showered ourselves in glory, have we? We haven't particularly managed things particularly right. Oh, our Wi-Fi is shocking, Ashley, isn't it? I'm going to phone. You know what? Someone said yesterday, I think it was Tim, just changing your provider is a big and elaborate process when you have what we have here for what we need to do. And it's just, all of the reach that you need to get to the house is a bloody nightmare. Have you heard about lockdown being extended? Sport bubbles gone, masks everywhere, lockdown till 23rd of March. Arch Clark. I can't say I have heard that. Things are going to get worse before they get better. And that was Chris Whitty's message today. And I think it's a very important message. I think they've wheeled poor old Chris Whitty out, regardless of what you think of him, to do a lot of the kind of heavy lifting, I think, for the government. I think we're at a point now where no one listens to what the government's saying. I think I said last night, even in Night Shift, we need to be really careful here. I'm not, Nadia would characterize me as being always drawn to the negative or always being circumspect, but maybe you could describe it as that. But Archie Clark, it's on BBC News, okay. But I like to think realistically, and I don't like to raise false hopes, and I don't like, because actually it really messes with my mental health. I mean, I often see Nadia hit great peaks of optimism and then she crashes. And I'm not saying I succeed at all. I had a real down day yesterday, partly because I managed to get all my work done. It's, I had a Sunday off. I paused. She's at Loose today, Julie Everts. Yeah, I mean, they talk about the fact that lockdown could go on to the 31st of March. They talk about the fact that they're trying to get 200,000 people vaccinated every day. And I think it's really important that we moderate promises and expectations with realities. So I think Chris Whitty says the most important thing. He says we're about to enter the most dangerous part of the virus. And then he does say, quite clearly, in terms of the NHS. And what he means by that is there's virtually, well, not no, but there's very little capacity in the NHS to cope with someone if, say, for example, I was a Burke up a stepladder and I had a really bad injury and I needed to go to hospital. These are pressures that they don't want to put on the NHS. This is the reason for not driving if you don't need to. This is the reason for not doing things that are dangerous. The last thing we should all be doing is DIY in the home. You need to be kind of making sure that the pressure on the NHS, where it normally comes from, with other sort of acute problems, doesn't happen. Now, coupled alongside that, random nothingness says something here, which is very important. I can't cope with any of this much longer. No jobs, savings are nearly gone, no government help at all. And Nadia sent her apologies, obviously, because she wanted to be here today. She'd much rather be here, bless her, today. She doesn't like being out in the world at all. And she said, and I've seen this as I'm driving around and I'm, been into town and what have you to pick up Nanny Di and things like that. There are a huge number of people, and the government can sit there saying, do this, you must do this, you must do that. There's a huge, vast majority of people who can't afford to not do anything, and it's really important that we say that. It's really important that it's not just a constant case of saying everyone needs to do this, everyone needs... Now, that doesn't apply to wearing masks, everyone should wear masks. It doesn't apply to what we'll talk about in a minute, supermarket rules and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean we don't take heed of what Whitty's saying. And it's not that we don't lose sight of the fact that actually the crisis here is an NHS crisis. Now, did anyone else have that? In the early days, March of last year, we all had fear around the virus. None of us knew to what extent. And I had a resurgence of that when we had these new strains coming through. Because, of course, that's the big worry. And I don't know if any of you remember, I talked about a programme that I'd heard on LBC late one night, about 6 or 7 weeks ago, where I talked about this idea that viruses mutate at the point that you block their avenues to get into hosts. So, for example, you put a vaccine in the way of something, you block it, it kind of goes towards it, goes, oh, I'll go a different way. That's how mutations sort of develop. And it seemed curious, didn't it, that as we were shielding more and more people, the virus mutated and started to there was talk of it being able to affect younger people a bit more. So, at the point of the mutation changing, I got worried. And I think at the point that we start to go into this vaccination process, we need to be prepared for the fact that other little mutations could happen too. They're very confident, those scientists, that they're going to be able to, constantly, tinker with the vaccines that we've got. But it's all pretty embryonic, and it's all pretty much hopeful, and it's all pretty much, a wing and a prayer. But the plain and simple things that we can be doing, if we can afford to do them, and I do think the government needs to do this, if they want a more rigid and stricter lockdown, they're going to have to compensate those people that can't afford to not go to work. They need to be able, as Random Nothingness says, they need to be able to compensate the fact that there are a whole number of people who aren't falling into any of the rescue packages that are there. And it's part of the reason why the test and trace couldn't work, because essentially the punishment for not going to work was too costly. So do you know what I mean? It's not just a cake. It's not a cake even. It certainly isn't a cake. It's not just a case of saying you need to do this. We were suggesting last week, perhaps what you have to do for, the reason nurseries are open, for example, is because the vast majority of people need to go to work who've got kids in nurseries. Then you're going to have to put most of those people who take their kids to nurseries, if you close the nurseries, on furlough. I heard someone yesterday, an economist, talking about the fact that with interest rates as low as they are, we have to, and it sounds ridiculous, but we need to not be thinking yet about how we dig ourselves out of this hole. We just need to effectively borrow to fix the hole and deal with it at a later date. And because interest rates are low, there's slightly more leverage to be able to do that. So my sense of things is, if it really is a case of a short-term national pull together, I think the government need to kind of go, right, furlough everyone, here's support for everyone, lockdown for 2 to 4 weeks. It's going to cost a fortune, but for 2 to 4 weeks, we get the vaccine out, we roll it out, and everyone can actually lock down. Do you agree? Does anyone agree? I think that's the kind of only way they can do it. Ashley Gardner, Matt Hancock is on every day now updating about how the vaccine. Well, look, I think Matt Hancock's rationale is to constantly keep the morale of the nation up by telling us how many people are being vaccinated. My problem with this is, if they do it a bit too much, we're going to get a bit sick and tired if what we're seeing is still the NHS stretched and more restrictions coming in. I think they're trying to do a trade-off where it's like, you do this, but look, this is happening and we're getting there. They have to do that. Jane Bentley, yeah. I think it has to be a short, sharp shock. And I think it has to be a short, sharp shock that acknowledges that for most of the people at the bus stop at the bus stop in Brixton or wherever, they're having to go and work. So, you need to be able to take the impetus of those people having to go and work. So yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, unless you do that, I don't, no amount of sort of tweaking at the edges. So all of this talk at the moment, how are you finding supermarkets, guys? Are any of you going to supermarkets? Yes or no? Are any of you going to supermarkets? I think people have taken the stance, who's that? Debbie Morris. People have taken the stance that the vaccine will sort everything out and now go out. And I think that's why Whitty is saying what he's saying. The other thing to remember with there are so many caveats with the vaccine. There's a 3-week window after it, and about 10 days after having the vaccine, you're not sort of impervious to possibly getting it. What I would like to know is if you've had COVID, are they still giving people who've had COVID the vaccine as well? So essentially, you'll have got a double dose of it. Does anyone know? I can't seem to find anything online about whether they're vaccinating people who've already essentially potentially got their own antibodies. Are they, when you have a vaccine, are you tested first to see if you're positive? Supermarkets are a nightmare. I mean, I just think that supermarkets need to reintroduce that really, I know it's terrible because of course it's that much colder, isn't it? And yes, as antibodies, sorry, I'm just looking at these answers. Yes, as antibodies fade after most people had it. I mean, how fast do antibodies fade? I mean, as we've often said, we're pretty confident Maddie had it in February before it was even formally a thing in this country. But she lost her taste, she lost her sense of taste and smell far, far, far later. And we've always assumed and presumed that was long COVID. But, we are hearing a few reports that people can test positive a second time. They get it less acutely, but you can test positive more than once. I mean, do we have any clear evidence or science on how long the vaccines last? I had my first vaccine, waiting for my second. So yes, so anyway, so there's that 3-week buffer zone, isn't there, between one, but it's going to be a 12-week buffer zone because they want to vaccinate as many as possible. I think really we're only going to discover the efficacy of that once a vast number of people have received their first jab, if you like. So yeah, I mean, in terms of this lockdown, Archie's saying on the BBC News that they're talking about a potential extension of this to March the 23rd. I don't know how we're going to float that out. Our Confessions of a Modern Parent this week is all about, how do you sell a third lockdown to your youngsters and your teenagers? I mean, even in the even in the sort of suitcase of tools or the toolkit of tools that I've got for distracting and entertaining and mobilizing and morale building, I'm running out. I mean, I have to confess, being a parent does help distract you from your own shit. If I stop, I don't know if anyone else feels this, if I stop and sit with my own feelings about it all, I can feel pretty bleak quite quickly. I still feel like I don't think I'll return. Archie Clark, my opinion, I'm in year 11, don't think I'll return fully to school, and also the government talking about the vaccine too much. People stop following the rules, defo people my age. Yeah, Archie, I think you're right. I think Chris Whitty is trying to combat the idea that for a lot of people, the idea that the vaccine's kind of here riding in on a white horse, everyone's sort of thinking the end is in sight. And it's that classic phrase, isn't it? And I've seen it happen when I've been filming adventure films many years ago, that literally when people start going downhill or climbing down from a mountain, your guard goes down, you're not thinking about safety as much because you're relieved to be returning, and you make an enormous mistake. And that is what the government is wanting to avoid here. And I think that is what is happening in the NHS. And that is why these NHS fake videos are an absolute outrage. The BBC has done a piece on them. I have to say, the journalism, if you search online, BBC News does a piece on fake videos in NHS, and they talk about the true story behind them. An appalling piece of journalism. I mean, about as rigorous as wringing a really dry tea towel out. It was just it just sort of said they filmed it here and the NHS has said it's not the case. The point is no one image and no one shot and no one portrait of an interior of anywhere gives you the full picture of anything. And I think that's where you end with a story like that and people doing that. And I think people trying to promote narratives that somehow there's a conspiracy theory or there's a desire to kind of, you know, push this false narrative and get us all kind of, you know, it's just nonsense. I mean, you know, you just have to take it as trusted, that there is a degree of pressure on these places, that, you know, that there are sort of socially distanced rules in some of these hospitals, which kind of enforces the fact that there are one-way systems, so you can get these shots, you know, these terrible shots being promoted all over YouTube and all over social media, trying to suggest that it's a huge mass fake narrative. I just don't think it is a fake narrative. I think what conspiracy theorists are trying to do with that sort of stuff around this crisis is apply a level of sophistry and sophistication to what's often just separate to the NHS hospitals, but with the government, when they keep suggesting, oh, they want to enslave us, it's just nonsense. It's just incompetence. It's incompetence and a lack of joined up thinking. It's being reactive rather than proactive. I think that's all it is. And I think sometimes, to be fair to some people who go the conspiracy theory route, we're trying to assign a far more sophisticated layer of kind of intention behind what's just a clusterfuck of total confusion. And you can quote me on that one, clusterfuck of total confusion. Exactly, is death fake? At the other end of that, though, Jess Edits, there is the point that we mustn't become, as a culture, death averse. And what I mean by that is we have to recognise that at every time of year, deaths happen. And I think there is a danger sometimes. I mean, this is a different debate. This isn't to say that someone's lying or it's fraudulent, but I do think we have to understand that, you know, there is an increase. There's a bounce always at a certain time of year where the most vulnerable, sadly die. And we mustn't get so socially, so squeamish at the idea that death happens, because unfortunately it does. What is happening with the Nightingale hospitals? Karen Ula, that's a really good question. What is happening with the Nightingale hospitals? We keep hearing about them. They keep being mobilised. I mean, I heard they were going to be used for like the overflow of outpatients recovering from COVID. But you're right. What is happening? Trying to get you back. Just had a little dip in 4G. I'm literally surfing between 4G and Wi-Fi. Is it a penny spearing? Could be a staffing issue. I mean, that was one of the main reasons, is that they're lacking staff. 46,000 staff are ill or unavailable. Agni Kazaku. Hi, Mark. My sister-in-law has COVID. She went to hospital, kept him for a few hours and sent home due to no beds. I mean, I'm hearing that quite a lot. Here's another one. I know Antonia Schwartz. I know a nurse working on COVID wards who was a conspiracy theorist in a resistance group against wearing masks. She keeps saying the media is making it sound worse than it is. It's really scary. Mackay Smith, Mark, why didn't they use, I've lost you, the Nightingale Hospital to discharge patients from hospital to, rather than send COVID-19 hospitals from hospital to care homes? I don't know. You tell me. Could it be a staffing issue, Mackay? Could it be a staffing issue? Miss Spice, usually in A&E, patients are put in corridors and extra rooms during busy periods, but they don't do that now. That's why the ambulances are queuing more than ever. Absolutely. You could have empty corridors and empty wards because a huge number of them are in ambulances. Henrietta Henson says that the Nightingale Hospital in Exeter is being used for London patients. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to know, we talked about it briefly last night, the 5 things that could happen in an intensified lockdown, which is the removal of bubbles, the removal of religious gatherings, mandatory mask wearing in public, and I do think they need to do a bit of checking on supermarkets. I mean, I remember Izzy saying quite early on, my eldest daughter, she said, Dad, they just haven't got the infrastructure for all of the things they need to do to make this happen. And I think there is a point that we have to listen to this, because, you know, there's been another outbreak in another city in the Hubei region, is it, in China? They've put the entire town on lockdown, city on lockdown. No gradations of kind of exceptions, just boom, lockdown. And you're dealing with, so when we point to these other countries, I mean, and Andrea Crash, I don't know whether you agree. I mean, even New Zealand has I think very coherently taken advantage of its island nature. So we could have done that, we just haven't. And so, but when you look at countries like South Korea and Taiwan and even Vietnam, you look at these other countries, there's far more of a deferential sort of attitude to government and governance than there is here. I mean, it's the age-old phrase, isn't it, in England? Every home is a man's castle, and it's kind of, I'm not going to be told what to do, and and all that kind of stuff. I think kicks in the UK. We have a sort of inherited, I don't know, superiority complex, which has bitten us on the arse. And I think in a lot of these other countries which we point to, there were a combination of either strict border controls and an absolute do as the government say. And the governments in these places have either historically been stricter with their populations, so there's no element of surprise when it happens. Whereas here, it's almost, sometimes I don't know, sometimes I just feel like it's a little bit analogous in this country with a parent that's overindulged its children. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes, that's what I feel. Orla Murphy, not enough checking in supermarkets, Mark. Some doing fine, others not. I think you should also check schools too by checking the temperature, etc. I mean, there was someone in our local Sainsbury's taking photographs of people coming in not wearing masks. She was a very tiny lady. And what she did was she was then sending or notifying the security guard as to who was coming in without masks, and then the guy was having to take them out. Once again, someone said the other day to Nads, why aren't they using security guards? I mean, some security guards in certain parts of London that we know and live in, the security guards aren't paid enough to challenge groups of youngsters. They just aren't. It's more hassle than it's worth, and with the threat from some youngsters that they'll spit at you and stuff like that. So I'm curious to go and see, has anyone seen what Archie Clark was talking about on the BBC News? Is there really a suggestion that this could be extended? Could this be extended? This lockdown, is that really what they're talking about? Are they suggesting it as a kind of necessary byproduct of if people don't observe the rules and regulations? Why is it such a big deal, Mark, for people to question these things? And it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal to questioning. Is absolutely spot on. Questioning is everything. But I think there's a difference between questioning and then assigning sort of bizarrely sophisticated societal plans of deceit. What I'm suggesting is that where I think there's sort of a malevolent intent, I think there's just pure incompetence. That's my feeling. I think it's easy, but on that basis, though, I do think we need to have our wits about us when we're being sort of hurled kind of fake news or just the tops of kind of positive news in order to distract from negative news. And equally, we need to work out, when negative news is thrown at us. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you do need to look at the mortality rates year on year. We've said many times on this channel, go and look at the headlines for every Christmas period every year before. And there's always, the NHS is in crisis at this time of year. The NHS is always under duress at this time of year. I just think it's fair to say that it's under more duress this year than any other previous year. So, yeah. Chelsea Girl, security guards have no rights and end up getting into trouble for the slightest touch of anyone. Absolutely. I mean, it's a thankless task. Erin Tyler Paris, you're allowed to question, but you still have to follow the laws and rules. Even if you think the whole lot is bullshit, you still need to follow the rules because they're designed to keep people safe. I mean, like we've said many times, we're fans and we believe in wearing, masks mandatory. I mean, if they come out and say you have to wear a mask when running, it'd be a bloody nightmare for me with asthma and running. And I'll do it. I'll absolutely do it. I'm not gonna go to Clapham Common, actively not wear a mask and complain about it. I just, or see it as some precursor to having some microchip inserted into my neck. I just think there's a real disconnect there sometimes. Whereas questioning, yeah, absolutely we have to question, and there is a real difference. And I do think that the press don't jab and question enough. What was some of the other things? So mass vaccination centres going up everywhere. Some of the thoughts I've had around these mass vaccination centres, has anyone else had this, is could they, through no fault of their own, inadvertently, if they're not managed properly, become super spreader places just prior to people, my over 50 fashion life. We will give you a sing-song when Nadia's back. Do you think they could end up becoming sort of places that, you know, especially, and mass vaccination centres for a majority of people over the age of 70 or 80? That's quite tough. I mean, my mum would struggle. She's at the lower end of the age range, and I know she would get a bit stressed and worried about going at the age of 70. Do you know what I mean? I think, yeah, it's an unusual one today. I think it's a special topic. She's doing loose today. I think there's all sorts of issues with availability of people and who can come to the show and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite complex at the moment. Welcome, my over 50 fashion life. Welcome, absolutely. You'll get a really badly sung song soon, I promise you. Siobhan Manning, we got you on the list as well. Have I got you on the list? Yes, Siobhan Manning, you're at the top. Didn't have you? I hope you had a lovely birthday, Siobhan, and we'll be giving you a little sing song too. Marky, and this is Trilio TV, people are saying the chip is in particles in the vaccine, so you won't know you've had it, but obviously I know it's not true and there's no chip. Maybe a sweet potato chip. You know, I think it's all right to have questions, like, I mean, I think another thing we've questioned a lot is the difference between the different types of vaccines, the RNA vaccine versus the Oxford AstraZeneca. You know, I think it's really, absolutely, you know, I'm much more comfortable with the idea of having the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, but then I suppose there are questions on if they're using dead virus, is it going to be as effective against the new variants? All these questions. There's a lot of these kind of questions that I do want answered, like, is the Oxford AstraZeneca, which is slightly less completely efficient, isn't it, 70 to 90 than the Pfizer one, how, and they feel and assume, though they haven't said definitively, that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines will work against the South African and Kent variants. Will the Oxford AstraZeneca work against these other variants too? And it would be nice, actually, if they just came out and said what the absolute knowledge is on that. Even if they're still working it out, just tell us. But again, you can see how that would be very hard for them to tell us that, whilst at the same time trying to mobilize people to get vaccinated. I mean, I think we have to be, you know, there is a worry that we could all be running like that. Jab me, jab me, jab me. And then we're all going to be told, no, go the other way. And then we're all going to run the other way and go jab me, jab me. I do sometimes worry that Monty Python could turn this into a, you know, when they used to do the strange kind of Olympics where they'd all run around in opposite directions. We could be having sort of a vaccine run around. No, we need to move on to the next one. Do you remember that movie Airplane, where the plane's taken off and there's that woman waving goodbye to her lover and she's running as if she's on a platform, but she's saying goodbye to a plane, and then she starts to knock the iron girders down. It's quite amusing. It's going to be like that. We're going to be all heading towards that vaccine, saying, no, we need to go to this one. No, new variant. Need to go to this one. You know, unless you laugh about it, you end up stabbing yourself in the eyes with a piece of Lego. Gilda Forster. Of course you are. Now, the only other story I wanted to talk about, was Kamala Harris is on the front of Vogue, and there are calls for Anna Wintour to be sacked as the editor. Now, I've got no feelings about Anna Wintour. She's very strange. She just wears shades. You never see her eyes. She's sort of like Andy Warhol, isn't she, in her own way? But there's a lot. Vogue and she are coming in for criticism for not being inspired enough in their set dressing and styling of Kamala Harris on their front cover, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, and so they're coming in for stick for that, but also for potentially sort of making her skin a lighter tone. And I just wondered whether you think that's... Yeah, well, I mean, I did look at the cover, and I suppose I didn't have any feelings or thoughts about the fact. I suppose I just didn't believe that they would have actively tried to make her skin lighter. I mean, I genuinely didn't. I didn't feel that. I did feel, what I did feel is from a photographic point of view, go and check it out after this and see what you think. Maybe we'll catch up about it. I just thought that the sort of, I don't know, what do you call it? Sort of silk drape behind her on a block of, it was a bit insipid and a bit, maybe maybe over 50 fashion life. Maybe you've got a thought on that. Holly, it's a shit photo. You're absolutely right, it's a shit photo. Archie Clark, it's headline news, lockdown could be extended. Okay, well, I'm going to go and have a look, and obviously we will talk about it in our night shift tonight. But yeah, have a look on you can see the Kamala Harris Vogue cover. Be interested to see what you think. Has prompted backlash and outrage with claims of disrespectful. This is on the Today website, American Today. You can go to Vogue magazine on Instagram and you'll see the front cover. And just tell me what you think about the sort of silk drape behind her. There are two alternate covers to it. One where she's wearing a sort of blazer. I prefer the blazer one. I mean, she looks stateswoman-ish. But yeah, see what you think about it. Guys, I'm heading off now, and a Cornish vlog will be landing later. It's been lovely spending time with you. I have a running list of people who've joined and who are going to be sung badly tomorrow by Nadia. Guys, lots of love. See you later, and stay safe, San Diego. I'm going to go and check out Archie. Thank you very much. This breaking news story, if it's on the BBC still.